Good morning. Today we are going to make up some railings, and we're using the experiences we've learned on the Naparima how to do this very delicate work. And here is the model under construction, and again it'll give you a feel for the project in total. We're just going to take you through this first part of the railing where we go from the bow and to the first step down. And you'll see that we have two railings, stanchions, and some posts. We're going to make up the railings using 4 pieces. First and most important is we were able to get these scale stanchions which are pre-drilled, which really saved me a huge amount of work. The second is the main rod, which makes up these posts here. These are the main posts that holds up the promenade deck and the roof, and that is 0.06 in terms of thickness, is brass rod. The wire that passes through the post is 0.020, and the gates that are made up, and there's one gate here, that's brass rod, that is 0.030. And that's why I started looking at resistance soldering, because I found it very difficult to use a regular soldering iron to achieve the quality of the results I was looking for. And there's no question that resistance soldering is part and parcel of our hobby, and it's a skill that we need to get. And of course, it's a tool we need in shop. And when you try to price that tool, certainly here in Trinidad, by the time it arrived into my shop, it would cost somewhere around $700 US. So what I wanted to make sure was that if indeed that was the way I was going to go, that I didn't buy a very expensive tool that I wouldn't use. And in fact, the experience that I have got from the feedback is that many people who have acquired the resistance soldering tool are very happy with the capability of what it does, but in fact use it very little. And $700 is a lot of money to have invested in a tool that you don't use. And so I started re-looking at how I might solve the problem, and in the end, inside my shop, found the solution that allowed me to proceed without buying the unit. So we can go straight into the problem. Here we have the post in the XY table, lined up perfectly to drill my hole. And when I turn on the drill press, of course it starts to slip. Of course, there's no way this drill press is going to get on the piece. And then if I tried to punch it, it was almost impossible. I ended up damaging the post. The solution turned up in my milling machine, where I had purchased these carbide end mills. These are 0.125, and that allows me to put a flat spot on the piece. This worked quite well, and I was able to drill 8 holes and make up 3 of the posts. But I still wasn't too happy, because I found that I had to be very careful with the drill bit still. And then in a conversation with a friend of mine, Bruce Mute, who's a jeweler, he said what they do is they put a diamond bit, and I happen to have one here, a round diamond bit that creates a little hole, because it's impossible for you to take a punch on the flat spot without damaging the post. So I got one of these dental bits. You can get them from any dental store. It's a diamond circular bit, and that gives me a little sink in the flat spot. and a touch of oil on the drill bit, and you get a perfect hole every time. Now we have to drill the second hole, and to make sure it lines up perfectly with the hole on the stanchion, this little gizmo, which is just a little pin that holds it in the hole, and then I come along and I can line it up perfectly. So I know that's where I drill my second hole, and then I simply repeat the process, put the flat spot in, use the diamond bit to create a little hole in the flat spot, and then drill the hole. And well, believe it or not, I was able to put 10 of these posts down, and I still am on the original drill bit, which surprised me. I think it's the oil that I used to keep the drill cutting. And again, one last look at the work. Very, very happy with how it's all turned out. It's the next day, and we've completed the starboard side of the railings, and we have two gates that we have to make. So I'm going to show you how I made up these two gates. Here's the plan, and this is the gate here, and it's actually a square gate. So after making 2 or 3 attempts which failed, I came up with this system, which is that I make up a square which I've rounded off on the sander, establish the center line, and it's the inside dimensions of this gate. And then what I do is simply take the heavier wire and bend it around the block. And I have this wonderful little tool that I bought for making these rounds a few years ago. And you can make it as tight a curve as you want. But you'll see it fits nicely over the piece. The problem you have is that when you try to make it exactly the same size, if you don't have a block like this, it's going to be problematic. Then I simply clamp the piece in and bend the other piece, and that gives me a correct dimension, and then back to the pliers. And you see it fits quite nicely. And then do the same thing on the other side. And you end up with a square like this. Then I solder it in the standard way. Put the centerpiece in, and that's resulted in this gate here, which is painted. And then rather than solder it, I've epoxied it on to the main post. Another interesting aspect of the railings is the construction of the railing on the steps. We're using the .032 brass rod, and we're going to use our little pliers to make the bend. And you'll see from the photograph posted on my right is that it's a very large half bend. The key, I find the key to doing this is to make sure that you don't bend the piece too much. So I've done a little half bend here, which will show you, and then you need to line up the two pieces so that the bends are exactly the same, because if they're different, you'll see it very clearly. I tend to put both of them together, and that's the best way to make them as identical as possible. The first thing we do is put the punch a hole only two marks that we have. And then we're going to use the turbo carver to start to establish the piece for the drill. Now we drill the holes. This one needs to be at 90 degrees. And this one needs to be at whatever it is. In this case, it's the same 90 degrees. Now, to be able to solder this, we need to really stick the center pieces. So we're using CA. Make sure they're exactly the same and leave that to dry, and then we'll fit the arms in, and then we'll set it up and solder the arm to the little center support. We've clamped everything in place. The step is clamped, the railing is clamped, and if we don't do that when we go to solder it, we'll have an issue. So some liquid flux, I'll just put some on there, and now we can apply some heat and some solder. And flip it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. And now we just clean up as we did with the first one we made up. We'll take her off to the paint shop, put 2 coats of paint on it, and then we'll bend the railing to match the promenade deck railing. Of course, we'll also have to cut 3 treaders off. This then brings us to the end of this video. We hope you found it useful, and we'll see you in some next video somewhere. Bye.